notwithstanding your comments about how to better integrate Syrian NGOs in this response, at least from my experience, I've been humanitarian coordinator maybe 5 or 6 times in the field, and I ran OCHA's response to the crisis for the last 20 years. I've never seen national NGOs incorporated, maybe not perfectly, but into full credit or dignity. I'd like to think, and maybe people will disagree, that this has changed in the Syria response. We established, and you mentioned whole of Syria without going into make as an effective response as possible, so that the resources that we have are used in the best way for the people we need. It is not a perfect. International NGOs inside Syria, international NGOs outside Syria. Syrian NGOs sit on this border. Now, it's not necessarily a democracy, but everybody's views are heard and taken into account, and there's a chance to influence policies, raise concerns, and bring up their issues. I'm getting to 1 minute, so I will where 80% of the funds that OCHA has from the pool fund have been given to Syrian national NGOs. The amounts are lesser in Syria and Jordan, like 15, 20%. But that's a far cry from my experience in other crises. It's simultaneous translation for all meetings, so meetings are held in English and Arabic. I've been in so many countries in Haiti for 3 years. We spoke English, we spoke French. Haitians speak incredible. It's a different. Maybe last word, 30 seconds. Information sharing remains a challenge. We understand, I understand the sensitivities for security. And as former head of UN security worldwide, effective. We cannot be wise in use of our resources. For example, we only learned, just by all our work and all we only learned in the last 4 to 5 weeks that there are over 40 Syrian NGOs working in the besieged areas. We had no clue. This is just now coming out. Analyzing organizations, but we need to know what is being delivered. And lastly, what happens is you undercut your contribution, and it's not fully appreciated. The role of the services, not just deliveries of items, but the role.
Hello, everyone. On this topic, as you know, most of you, clusters are based on 2 principles, the humanitarian principles and principles of partnership. The principles of partnership includes equality, transparency, responsibility, and complementarity. While we were working as part of the health cluster, one of the challenges that we have is Syrian NGOs, we are able to reach our voice to the coordination system. So last year, while we were putting the whole year plan, we talked about the inclusion of a Syrian co-lead in the coordination structure, and this is where I come. And also the whole experience of doing cross-border coordination is unique because it's a remote management of a crisis in the middle of a war. That's what this response is doing, is that it's also innovative. We are doing emergency coordination response 24/7 using new technologies. We use lots of messaging to us. Every information reaches us very, very quickly. We try to coordinate between the national NGOs and international NGOs as soon as possible. And that results in coordination.
60 organizations inside Syria. And Lana had mentioned, for example, the vaccination campaign that took place, and we all know that physicians, nurses, and so on were moving from one house to another to make sure all the children were vaccinated, and that's how the NGOs were the most efficient inside Syria to deliver those vaccines. But at the same time, we lost some of our physicians and nurses as they were targeted doing that. So Samah, can you start teaching us a little bit more about the coordination on the ground inside Syria and your vision for it?
Yes, so for field coordination, we as SRN, we are an umbrella of 60 organizations, and we started basically to be active in Gaziantep with a Turkey hub, OCHA, and the coordination structure for the last 2 years, and we noticed the lack of having the actors on the ground to be involved in that structure. And since 8 months ago, we launched a platform of field coordination where we are targeting 4 geographic areas with coordinating 4 sectors, and running meetings on the field level where the local actors with local authorities and the stakeholders comes together to coordinate the response. And for us, we see that as empowering the Syrians on the ground who are risking their lives by being part of the decision making, that they feel that they are honoring this response and giving their trying to enhance and respond as effective as they could. And this is where we feel that this structure complement what the coordination structures of whole of Syria and the cluster structure to feed into the information and the data that has been missing and having a gap to promote the accountability for those for the response. So for that, we are being able to close this gap, and we would like also to expand to other geographic area and to other sectors to be able to complement their response and to turn it to a more effective response.
Thank you so much. So we'll move on to the next.
I was really obliged and committed to respond to the worst crisis, as you described, Ahmed. At the same time, there was no experience in what is civil society and what it does and how it is shaped. Despite that, in 5 years now, we are talking about organizations that evolved from grassroots organizations to networks, and finally, recently, to a league, a network of networks, which is the highest in the hierarchy of a civil society system.
Responsible for 88% of these attacks and responsible for 97% of health personnel killed. Targeting hospital, unfortunately, increased in the second half 2015 after Russia entered Syria. So, which lead to migration, a lot of medical staff out of Syria. Unfortunately, I have lost the best friends, 2 friends in the last month. Dr. Hassan Al-Araj, Hama, Health Director. Unfortunately, Dr. Hassan Al-Araj was me in Qatar. There was conference about health situation inside of Syria, and he was presenter about protection of health facility. But after he come back to Syria, he was killed there. And unfortunately, I lost my best friend, Dr. Wasim Maaz. Everyone know about Al-Quds hospital attack. This is my hospital. I lost still 2 years in this hospital. We was sleeping in the same room. So I can, until now, I can't go inside of Syria and still working inside of Syria, but a lot of doctors, not like me, they go out of Syria. This is a big challenge for us. Just, I want to see one word. I want to ask all international agencies to help us, to support us in our response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Underpaid, overworked, operating on very low budgets for our core team, which means that in a lot of the times, coordination has been really a white man luxury for us. We cannot send every staff to 4, 5, 6 OCHA, UN, and meetings, plus have our own meetings as Syrian civil society organizations. And other than that, the second obstacle that we were facing is the fact that, unfortunately, a lot of the funding has created some rivalry because of the lack of resources, which means that a lot of our organizations, as Dr. Zaidoun was saying, because we are new in the civil society, it took us a little bit of time to gain our trust to each other, but also our ability to coordinate with each other. border. I think one of the first instances of that was when we were invited, although it was a very ad hoc and last-minute invitation to the London conference, we were able to gather our efforts as Syrian civil society organizations and deliver one strong and unified message in which she says that in 2014, although 75% of the work inside has been, and in Syria generally has been done by Syrian organization, only 0.3% of the direct funding went to Syrian organizations, and only 9.3% of the indirect cash funding overall for Syria response went through the local actors. And while transparency is being committed over and over by NGOs, only there is still 30% of the funding of the Syria response that remains unknown, so we don't know where it is. This statement has been endorsed by 83 organizations, which I think is a great outcome. I really hope that you all help us disseminate it widely, and I really hope that we all continue working together to evolve the system. And finally, I think it's question time, so please ask a Syrian. Thank you.
Thank you.
We had great efforts collectively. Everyone was involved in the advocacy strategy and outreach we had to protect and to get the basic of the basic. Huh? We are not asking for much. We want hospitals safe, which is something people would ask, huh? No one would believe that this is happening in Syria. But in fact, I would say we failed. And I think now we should tell everyone that we might give up very much soon. Khalas, we will go and build our hospitals under the ground, in caves. We are doing that. It doesn't really protect all the time, because Dr. Hassan Araj was leaving something called the cave hospital. Thank God now we are 10,000 years back in history, and we built our hospitals in caves. So he was leaving the cave hospital when he was assassinated. So we went from, after so much advocacy, we went out from targeting hospitals to targeting physicians directly. In fact, either we don't know much about advocacy, or we finally have to declare our failure. There is nothing much we can do, and as Kevin said, either we now start a new advocacy strategy to change the voting system in the Security Council, and I think this is a bit beyond us, or we just live with the reality. Our hospitals will remain the target, ever, always. Shall I give the audience just a small, silly joke, which I have repeatedly said? Al-Sakhur Hospital is a hospital that is run by Sams. So, like 2 years ago, they decided to move because they used to receive 2 barrel bombs a day, more than patients. So they decide to move, and they find a place under the ground. It happens to be close to Free Syrian Army barrack. And the Free Syrian Army tells the hospital, no way, you don't come here. If you come here, we'll be targeted. Salam knows the story, right? It's a silly joke, right? But it's painful. It's very painful for us. We've had enough. I really urge every one of you to go back, to go home and say, let us think of something to do to stop targeting hospitals. If anyone can suggest anything, I would really appreciate, because we have exhausted all possibilities, ever. Conferences, media, meeting with governments, and then everybody says, oh my God, this is really painful. Well, I could have said that to myself, and I don't want more sympathy, I want action, but there's no action. That's it, sorry.
Thank you, Zidu. Actually, I just want to... I just want to reinforce the point that Zidu... So, to continue with a different model also that was not well described before, and it's well seen right now with the Syrian crisis, is the remote management. And I'm going to move on to Dr. Manal. She has an extensive experience in dealing with the besieged areas. where we have no access physically to go inside and do inspections, and how she performed over there and how she responded to certain crises. Tormana.
Good morning, everybody. We are talking about a team besieged area as classified by United Nations and an unknown number of the hard-to-reach area. I think it's about 40% of Syrian land. 4.5 million human beings are there. This is the man-made hazards, blockade and isolation, political tension and unstable rules of engagement all contribute to creating a unique hazardous environment for relief and development effort in Syria. We think that relief efforts in Syria are against politically motivated blockade and forbidden access. There is no amount of direct international relief could pierce through deliberate blockade. Why to go remote? Why this is the choice? Because of personal security of the staff and because we don't have a freedom of moving in and out. The people who are inside cannot get outside and the reverse. And also because of immediate, we are afraid about our immediate friends and relatives and families who are there in the nearby area. They can move freely, but they cannot talk to their relatives. Also, 1 kilometer away, you have to imagine this, how difficult is this? It's really hazardous to talk to them even and to share with them any item or money. Legality. Open relief efforts are often conducted with government involvement and approval. In our case, there is no way, no path to certification of national and international NGOs to work in this area that we are talking about without liability. The trusted connection, the problem of sending money, we need a circle of trust also. This is one of the obstacles that we face. The money cannot reach in the legal way. We have to be frank. We are working through circle of trustees. This is the role of the NGOs. You know us outside, nobody can reach directly to the people down. Opening relief channel in isolated blockade area require the use of many ways of shipping and transport, resulting in emergent expenses. These expenses cannot be predicted ahead of time, or even though we cannot know how much will be the actual expenses, because of up and down, changing the dollar, and because of the unknown expenses on the different blockades. The border access, which is a very important issue. Rules and laws of borders crossing differ greatly by each country involved, with some being completely off limits. This is one of the obstacles that we face. The online training of training, capacity building of working locals. We have no physical presence, only mental. We can talk, but we cannot see. We are not able to meet them face to face, unable to reinforce them with specialized manpower. Or internal work is being done by Syrian hand, based on their capacity and knowledge and ability and initiative. We have to know this. The point that Dr. Zaidon he talked about it, the cultural barrier. We have to admit that the long-term misunderstanding and cultural war between Western and Middle Eastern cultures have created a trust issue with the outside world. Our role as Syrian NGO, and we grown from the land, and then we are also trying to find our way outside. This is our role of understanding their fear and anxiety of dealing with outsiders can be challenging, even for the NGOs familiar to the Middle East like us in Syria. Fear of unwittingly supporting terrorism has set back foreign aid to Syria. That's why we consider NGO responsibility in that regard. Also private donation, also it's fear of guilt by association. The basic necessity, which is the most important issue that I would like to tell you, you have to imagine that you are all going to move to a new house, but this house in an area that is really deprived of any sort of communication. You don't have telephones, you don't have Wi-Fi. It is deprived of any source of energy, no electricity, no fuel. It is deprived from water tap in your houses. You have to close your eyes and imagine that you are in this area for 3 years and a half until the moment. So the communication tools is a burden for us for the bringing the equipment inside, maintenance of the equipment, and if it is directly attacked because it is really under attack, how to replace it and how to maintain it and how to charge it continuously. This is one of our hazards. Then the second one, how to enter to the blockade area medical goods, like vaccination, like disposables, specialized pharmaceutical, like milk formula for infants. You cannot produce it inside equipment, as I said. All this obstacle you have to imagine how it is difficult. Now we have to move to another chapter, which is also important for us: evaluation and monitoring versus exclusion. Two separate groups are working on land. Ensure the independence of evaluation and monitoring groups from the executive groups. We are not part of either, but there should be two parts on land. The part that is executing the relief and the part that is monitoring, and we have to put them two separate groups, and both of them we cannot go and see them directly. We just depend on their words. Assisting local capacity and initiative, as I said, I passed through that. Online instruction and education, I think we have to keep it simple as much as possible. I do agree with Dr. Zaidan. I myself sometimes don't understand the protocols that coming from higher up, the NGOs, the international NGOs. It's quite complicated with difficult language. As you see, my language is simple. Maybe you can understand every single word, because they try to give me more specific words. I refuse to use it because it's really difficult for me. So we have to keep it simpler for them. They are on land, they are the people working. Simple practical protocols, easy to understand by the client in a language or manner that is familiar to them and applicable by them. So excuse me because I make it too long, but 4 words only. In summary, trustworthy, a chain of trust, transparency, documentation, and evaluation, because we want to trust them and to trust us, and applicable. It should be tailor-made by the remote client. It should be applicable to them. We should ask them what they could do, what is their capacity. Target-oriented, who it was made for, what it does, and what the project limitations are. And the last, and this is the most important also, the commitment. Ensuring long-term commitment of financial support and avoid sudden withdrawal, because if we stop supporting any project, the project is going to stop completely, and we will have to restart from the beginning, which is one of the difficulties there. Sorry.
Friendly spaces for children, and them putting this as a priority for them, it did empower them through the platforms that they wanted to do this assessment. And for us, we provided them with very little funds, less than $15,000, where we were able to get 1,050 schools information and data that we went through all the schools in Aleppo Governorate and Idlib Governorate, and we were able to collect that data, and now we are analyzing it, and we're going to release this report, which is, in my opinion, a very great achievement, seeing how the community, when they get together, when they wanted to do the priority and want to do the assessment and feel the need of the assessment and to recognize if this assessment will be done and this data will be available, that we will be funded. This is where and this is also the other thing that I wanted to say, the coordination work. It's 28 local organizations who did this and coordinate that assessment. So for us, being able to coordinate the local actors and empowering them is where we can get the accurate data from the ground, knowing exactly what's happening and what exactly is needed on the ground. And this is where we wanted to provide the services and the help where it's needed, the most vulnerable people. And this is what we could also achieve.
Thank you. Any other comments from the panelists? Kevin, for example, in terms of those data?
Right now in Syria. And when it comes to donors, it's the most difficult place to give money to. The first concern the donor has is, well, how can you make sure that education is not getting to extremist end? Well, we don't teach jihad, and we don't teach Islamic math, we don't teach Islamic biology, right now, Syrian children are deprived of education, and this will bring them more, make them more easy to be taken by extremists. In 10 years, we will be fighting Syrian children because we failed to give them education. Is this fair?
Absolutely not.
10 years, they will be extremists. You're just leaving them. And now then in 10 years, these are extremists and we should fight them. Do the duty now. Educate them now to protect us and yourself. 2 million children is not a problem for Syria and not a problem for the neighboring countries. It's a problem for everyone in this world.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zidane. Kevin?
Just a generation that UNICEF is leading the way on, and good on them, has really gotten a lot of support. I think of the monies pledged in London, 1.6 billion was towards education, both inside Syria and outside Syria. It's a challenge. Those who were in the UNICEF panel yesterday, it makes your heart go. You know, kids can be cruel. And listening to that one young Syrian kid who was in a school in Turkey, and they didn't use his first name, they called him the Syrian. You know when you're 13, 14 years old, you want to be accepted, you want to be part of things. I thought my heart went out to this kid. It was tough. Huh? I think lastly, going back to what the doctor was saying, Dr. Ruba, you know, I am unfortunately in advocacy, and you can be pessimistic. When the guy who was taking the pictures of the people who were tortured and killed in the prisons in Damascus took those pictures out, all 5,000 of them, displayed, you know, worldwide in the lobby of the UN Secretariat, you would think this would have been you know, some kind of tipping point moment. Yeah. I always think back to the Balkans when the bomb exploded in that village square and killed 82 people. That changed attitudes. We've had lots of market square bombings in Syria. It hasn't changed a damn bit. I don't know what it's going to take to change this dynamic. And unfortunately, and I agree, Doctor, nothing has really worked. I do think this is a very small thing, and I'm probably, you know, I can't use the expression here, but going the wrong direction here. Pictures from on the ground in Syria are important, yeah? And it's amazing in this Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp world, we, at least maybe I'm just not reading the right things, we don't get as many pictures of actions and destruction on the ground as one would like to see. I would like to use these pictures in UN sit-reps and reports, et cetera. So when you talk about the murder of the doctors and the bombings of the hospitals, to insert graphics and things, which I think have more of an impact. It's not going to change world opinion, but I think it would make a more telling and compelling story. I'll stop there. I see the Secretary General's people are here, so maybe he's coming.
I'll move on to Lana, and okay, I was thinking about a great question, challenging question for Lana, but I think I will start with a statement that's made by the UNICEF, that about 65% of the WASH performance inside Syria was done by the Syrian NGOs. And about 75% of the total aid also was delivered by the Syrian NGOs. That's the UNICEF statement. Is that correct?
This is definitely related to the UNICEF cross-border response.
Right.
2/3 of our sophisticated WASH rehabilitation work was done by Syrian NGOs, 1/3 by international NGOs. 75% of the aid delivered was by also Syrian NGOs.
Can you share with us your experience working with the Syrian NGOs and the...
I'll start with the fact that we've worked with Syrian NGOs, and the partnership has evolved and expanded since the start of the cross-border operation, but not only focused on some of the life-saving immediate response activities. The example on the WASH rehabilitation, this is basically a longer-term activities. The same with immunization, for example. Majority of these activities, they require having access, and by access I mean deep access, not just to the areas restricted to the strip of the Turkey border, but in besieged areas and in hard to reach. The immunization campaign, 12 round of polio campaign, house to house, reaching 1.4 million children, 12 times since the crisis started. Just to give some background, when we first arrived in Turkey, Syrian NGOs have already been there. They started the response in 2012. So there was already a setup. The UN came and we were not very rich. We had to focus on our basically added value. The NGOs were well funded through the diaspora and other means. So we had
you with a tribute to those who we are working for, and those. This has 100,000 names of the Syrian people who died. It was done by my colleague Lina Sergia, who leads the current foundation. Obviously, this is at this time this is outdated, as we're looking for more 400,000 people who died inside Syria. Again, I thank you for joining us this morning, and I would ask you please to come over here and join us. Thank you. All the names are documented. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad Tarakij, moderator, Syrian American Medical Society, distinguished representatives of Syrian and non-governmental organizations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and friends of Syria. Salam alaikum, merhaba, good morning. It's a great pleasure to meet you, but with very heavy heart. I didn't expect to receive this very thick book. I just saw just a name, one name. There is no address even. But listing names that thick, that means how many people do you think have been killed during last 6-year crisis in Syria? The most conservative estimate has been most recently 250,000, well over 250,000. As a Secretary General and United Nations system have been very careful in issuing the number, estimated number of people dead, starting from 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. We were very seriously considering whether we should announce this. When there was a 200,000 mark, we were again very much seriously considering. By that time, I was insisting that I think more than 300,000 must have been killed. Why do you insist on 200,000? No, we have to make sure. We don't need to give unnecessary alarms. Then there was internal fightings all the times like this. Then 250,000, this number has been there at least 1.5 years. So I've been saying that it's strange that during last 1.5 years, you see many people are being killed. Can you have most updated one? There has been constant discussion, internal discussions, very serious discussions. Then suddenly one day, the special envoy, Stefan de Mistura, said 400,000. Since he said so, this must be authoritative one, but I'm sure that more than 400,000 people must have died. I don't know how many people have been listed there. I don't think 400,000 will not be, might not have been listed there. Then even with the less number, you have this thick book, only the names of death. I'm receiving this book with really heavy heavy heart. This is a totally unacceptable situation. As a Secretary General, this is really, I think you will share with me a heartbreaking situation now. Ladies and gentlemen, the humanitarian situation in Syria has been of the gravest concern, not only to me, to whole world's people during last full 5 years now. We have just begun in March, 6th year. Yesterday's use of bomb attacks in Tartus and Jabaleh are further demonstration that there is nowhere safe for civilians to go. This year alone, continued fighting and airstrikes have caused thousands of terrified children, women, and men to flee their homes, seeking safety from bombs, shelling, and other violences. I'm also very worried about the escalating military activity in areas in and around Damascus, in Aleppo, and Idlib, and north of Homs, which is causing mounting civilian casualties. I call on all parties on the cessation of hostilities to abide by its terms, and I call on all member states to use their influence immediately to end the carnage by bringing about a negotiated settlement and a political transition. Despite the modest progress on reaching some besieged areas in recent weeks, millions of Syrians are trapped without access to food or essential medical care. International humanitarian law very clearly states the responsibility of warring parties to protect civilians and to do everything possible to avoid the civilian casualties. Denying people access to food and medical care is another serious violation. Attacks on hospitals are war crimes, and those responsible must be held accountable. I have already requested formally 2 times, at least 2 times, to the Security Council that those perpetrators who committed war crimes and crimes against humanity must be brought to International Criminal Court. And High Commissioner for Human Rights also made a formal statement to that effect. Ladies and gentlemen, and despite this continuing horror, Syrians working to help and protect each other every day are an example of humanity and solidarity to the world. The courage and dedication shown by Syrian volunteers and staff members of NGOs and civil society groups who brave rockets and bombs to perform search and rescue work and to deliver humanitarian aid of all kinds is moving and inspiring. Local people and organizations do the vast majority of humanitarian work around the world. In Syria, local NGOs and civil society organizations can reach places and people that foreign groups cannot access. Their networks and understanding of local conditions and culture make them a crucial partner for the United Nations and the entire international humanitarian community. Syrian humanitarian workers have paid a terrible price for their bravery. Hundreds have been killed and many more injured. Your commitment is an example to us all. Protecting humanitarian workers is a core tenet of international humanitarian law. My senior officials and I raise it every opportunity with member states and in the international community. Mobilizing world leaders to recommit to upholding the rules of war is one of core responsibilities of the Agenda for Humanity, which will be adopted at the end of today. People sometimes tell me I have the most difficult job in the world. At those times, I think of humanitarian workers struggling to deliver life-saving aid under fire, and I cannot agree to that. There are many more people who are working most difficult job now. The United Nations will continue its partnership with you and will build and expand on our relationship for as long as Syrians need humanitarian aid. And beyond that, when a negotiated settlement for transition is reached and you start the work of rebuilding your beautiful country. In the meantime, Stefan de Mistura, with the help of ISSG, particularly United States and Russia, are working very hard to resume this political dialogue in Geneva as soon as possible. And at the same time, we believe that just going on this dialogue may not give answer when these hostilities continue. The cessation of hostilities must be holding so that we can deliver humanitarian assistance to many people. There are still 4.6 million people who are living in the besieged and hard-to-reach areas. We've been really trying to do that. As I told you, many hundreds of humanitarian workers of Syria have been killed. That really hampers our international humanitarian workers to have access. I've been urging them to get rid of or eliminate all these cumbersome administrative hindrances, bureaucracies, and roadblocks, checkpoints. That's why we've been even trying to provide aid through airdrops. But airdrops, it is easy to say, but very difficult in practice. Because of the very serious danger, they cannot do it at a low altitude. They have to go very high altitude, many thousand feet above, like a little lower than normal airplane altitude. Then you may expect that there will be heavy wind, all these weather changes, then you don't know where these parachuted pellets may land. It's very difficult to have them land at the designated, targeted area. But we will do again soon to provide humanitarian assistance as much as we are doing, employing all the means possible for Syrian people. Please know that even though there are still many people who need desperately our aid, while we are not able to meet all the requirements, but we are doing our best. But I ask you to be courageous and hopeful, also persevere all this situation. I know that the Syrian people are very intelligent people. One day, just a few years ago, many years ago, I was invited by Syrian ambassador at the time. There was a peaceful time. It was a peaceful time in New York. I normally don't attend that kind of a function. I was surprised that there were about 200 Syrian community in New York. Most of them were medical doctors. So I thought that then are there only Syrian doctors in New York? There are so many medical. Everybody who presented themselves with a name card was medical doctors, all medical doctors. I was impressed. Wow, all Syrians are medical doctors in New York. I thought that there are many Korean doctors, but much more. So that much, you are really intelligent person. Again, I thank very much for your strong commitment and commitment for humanity and peace. I thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Rush to the next event. Sorry, took the. No, I mean.
Mr. Secretary General, we are NHK. Until now, especially the speeches by the states, the governments, on how to stop the bloodshed in Syria. I myself felt...
I wish I could see more serious work to end the war in my country. All what I hear right now is all what I heard for the past 5 years. There is nothing that gives me new, that tells me there is something new in this event. I hope there is something, but I have my doubt.
You mentioned there is no action.
There is no action.
So
there is no action.
Some of the countries accuse each other, the supporters, the regime and supporters of opposition in the speeches.
I'm a medical organization, okay? I don't care who supports whom. I want the basic right of a human being to be served in a hospital, to be hospitalized, to be cured. So this is the basic. So I don't know who is supporting whom. I don't care. I want only one thing: protect hospitals. That's it. Is this too much?
In this summit, there is no, for the member states, there is no obligatory obligation for the commitment. So what do you think about it? Just speeches.
We will keep pushing, but again, as I said, I mean, protocolic, nice speeches, but not much sense in it. I don't see it. I don't feel it. I hope I'm mistaken. That's it.
Now the schools are targeted, the hospitals are targeted, and humanitarian situation is getting worse and worse. How are you frustrated as a medical?
I have to live with hope. Otherwise, we could have closed and just went back to our homes. I still have to live with hope. However, the frustration, the disappointment, the ample pain inside us is enormous. We don't know what to say, what to do, how to react. For 5 years, we have been calling for just the full protection of hospitals, the basic principle, the basic of the basic, with no action. Frustrates, but we will keep on. What can we do?
What do you demand the international community now?
End the war in my country. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The agenda for humanity that was put with a pure commitment, it does serve the Syrian causes, because Syria being the biggest crisis since World War II, as a humanitarian crisis that affected more than 13 million Syrians and more than 11 million displaced people, that the summit is serving the cause to enhance the humanitarian response for the future, and the core commitment, all of them, is really backing up to respond to the Syrian crisis and to the humanitarian needs of the Syria crisis.
When we heard the speeches of the states, head of states and officials, some of the states just accuse the other countries regarding how to stop the bloodshed of the Syrian situation. So there is no concrete steps to stop.
So
how are you frustrated?
The humanitarian deterioration situation in Syria is related to a politic cause, and there is not a very wide politic will to end it. And yes, we need more political leaders to take leadership on ending this crisis. And we will call all the leaders to end this crisis because of the consequences of that the people is suffering from the crisis and from the war.
Now inside Syria, the hospitals are targeted, schools are targeted, so the situation is getting worse. So, but the effort for stopping the war itself it's a bit stuck.
Yes.
How do you think about it?
Again, we need a political will from the leaders of the whole world to stop this war. The consequences of not taking action has been the people suffering inside Syria and paying the prices. And the money that's spending on the war is much more higher than the money that's spending on eliminating suffering. And we need to eliminate the suffering by ending the war and ending the funding the war and trying to get all the leaders to commit to that ending suffering for the Syrians.
Thank you very much.